All right, good morning, everyone, and happy holidays to all of you. Before taking a few questions, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about our homeless population in Baltimore and our efforts to make homelessness rare and brief in our city. Like all of you, I've been deeply concerned about the growing number of individuals who are homeless in our city. In the last point in time count, over 2,400 people were identified as sheltered, with another 337 being unsheltered. Many of the people who are unsheltered are living in encampments throughout the city, which are unsafe and not fit for human habitation. So today, I'm announcing our Homes for the Holiday campaign. This campaign includes new permanent supportive housing, additional vouchers for the Housing First program, and increased outreach staff who will connect the homeless individuals who have the longest history of staying on the streets and in shelters with housing and supportive services. Last week, the Board of Commissioners of the Housing Authority of Baltimore City approved my request for an additional housing choice vouchers to be set aside for our Housing First program. Currently, this brings the number of vouchers from 650 in 2014 to 850. The number of vouchers for citizens returning from incarceration has also been increased from 200 to 250. In terms of permanent housing, the first 11 units for homeless families are ready for occupancy as a result of this summer's request for proposal process. HABC approved applications for 102 permanent units for homeless families through this RFP. The balance of these units will be completed within the next 18 months. And while this may seem like a modest step, I believe it shows that we are moving in the right direction. The reality, however, is that government cannot do this alone, and we haven't been. I'm proud of the incredible work that the continuum of care providers deliver to our homeless citizens, and I'm grateful that the city is able to play a role in supporting their efforts. Together, we can accomplish even more. For example, this week, with the start of winter, we are working together to ensure that we expand our winter shelter resources for people who are homeless. First, a bit of background to clear up some confusion that occurred earlier this week. Some people confuse our declaration of Code Blue winter weather as being the only time we activate additional resources for our homeless population. In fact, Code Blue is a declaration made by our Health Commissioner, Dr. Lena Nguyen, and the declaration brings with it a multi-agency coordinated response to relief from extreme cold weather for citizens across the city. But our efforts to provide additional shelter space for homeless start well before we reach the Code Blue declaration. Beginning with the onset of cold weather in November 15th, our private providers and the city together have been prepared to increase our shelter capacity from about 1,190 beds to about 1,400 beds at our 13 existing year-round shelters. This is an additional 221 beds. I'm also pleased to announce that we'll be adding a new winter overflow shelter at the Oliver Recreation Center on a temporary basis with space for 250 additional homeless each night. Initially, we will plan to operate this shelter shelter with city employees whenever the temperature and wind chill go below 32 degrees. And my team is working to identify a private provider who can take over operation of this shelter, and when a contract is in place, we'll anticipate that the private provider will operate this overflow shelter each night throughout the winter, ending in mid-March. If we are unfortunate enough to endure a sustained period of particularly cold temperature or heavy snowfall, my staff is also prepared to look at additional options for opening emergency shelter space beyond the beds that I've just talked about. I want to thank my team for putting together these plans to ensure that we look out for some of our most vulnerable citizens. And I'm joined today by two of the people who have led these efforts, Dr. Jacqueline Duvall Harvey and Vidya Dunrosh. Am I close? Thank you. The three of us stand ready to answer your question. Anybody?
Yes, I'm new to this whole. There was some issue about the temperature being lowered Can you explain exactly what happened there, and what you believe was sort of misreported, and what the facts are?
So what was misreported was the fact that we actually did not lower the temperature. The Code Blue declaration, what is called a Code Blue Day, is set by the health department and declared by the health department, and that generates a series of resources across the city, including education for the general public in terms of the risk of being exposed to cold. So we give messages around staying warm, staying indoors, and those kinds of things. Last year, if you recall, or perhaps you weren't aware of this, last year we had severe cold. Mm-hmm. We had severe cold for about 20 days, and that was pretty, out of the ordinary. So as a result of those days last year, which we had not anticipated happening, we did operate emergency shelters last year. This year, the only difference was that instead of waiting to have cold days like that, we decided to be proactive and have an additional category beyond the standard of Code Blue declaration days in the event that there was serious cold, so that we would actually have a shelter set up and ready to go if the temperature dropped to a point where we felt we needed to have an emergency shelter. So that was what was going on. Code Blue has not changed, the standard remains the same, and as the mayor indicated, whenever there is a serious enough issue in the city that we are concerned about the health and safety of our residents, we step up and set up an emergency shelter. I want to be also really clear that emergency shelters are not only related to temperature. So perhaps you remember 2 years or 3 years ago, we had a derecho where people lost power and individuals were in their homes without electricity. So in situations like that as well, we activate the emergency operations centers, and we also provide shelter for individuals who are without their homes, or their homes are not in a condition that they can remain in them. So emergency shelters are a standard. Sometimes it's a climate issue, sometimes it's an environmental issue. Various issues, we have a system that is in place to activate emergency operations, but in the case of Code Blue, based on the experience of last year, we wanted to be prepared in case we had such severe cold weather again. And the preparation was simply making sure that the shelter stood ready to go, as opposed to a sudden drop in temperature, and then we started to activate in that moment. So that's the primary difference.
And the 850 housing vouchers, those are vouchers that homeless people can receive and then get housing from the housing authority?
Correct. So they have to be eligible. They are called Housing First. It's a Housing First program, and we earmark them for individuals who have been on the streets, as the mayor mentioned, in encampments the longest, because those are the individuals that are most difficult to place, and the people that we really want to make sure discontinue the practice of living in areas where they are not safe and not able to remain. So there is a priority for those individuals. And some of those individuals may have access to other housing opportunities based on whatever benefits or particular life circumstance that they may have, for example, if there are disabilities and things like that. So the outreach staff who are going to be part of the Homes for the Holidays campaign are the individuals who connect the homeless with the resources after doing a thorough assessment, after getting the required documentation, and then after that individual selects the place where they want to live, because that's who actually makes the selection.
And is there a gap between the number of unsheltered homeless people and the number of vouchers that are available? I heard there was unsheltered was only
sure.
337.
So that's the unsheltered count at the last pit count for this year. The city does not have sufficient permanent supportive housing, and I'm not sure if you understand what permanent supportive housing is different from other housing. Mm-hmm. For individuals who are homeless, of that subgroup, there are some individuals who have both mental health and substance abuse issues, have other disabilities, and their ability to stay in a home can be compromised. So for example, if they're not paying their bills on time, if they are delusional and not conducting themselves well, they may be put out. So there are a host of reasons why an individual may be in a home and not be able to remain in the home in the same way the average person might. But to be quite frank, even average people have trouble sometimes keeping up with mortgages and things like that. So we're not talking about owning a home, but we're talking about usually renting. So it's important that if an individual has those kinds of issues, that they have the supports they need to remain in their home once they have found a home. And so that's what we talk about when we talk about permanent supportive housing, as opposed to simply putting a person in a house and expecting that with all of the disabilities that they have, that they will be able to remain. We don't want them to go in for a short time and then be back out on the street. And this housing first concept is a concept promoted by the federal government, and the majority of our city partners participate in promotion of that concept, making sure, first of all, the individual has a home, and then we support them in remaining in the home.
And where are the vouchers used? Are they with any participating landlord, or with public housing, or what?
Right. So public housing oversees the program.
Okay.
Landlords are invited to participate in the program, and the actual tenant selects the property that they want to live in. So we are not, it is expected that we do not influence individuals in where they live. I will also say that it is often difficult to get landlords to agree to participate, because there are some people who don't necessarily want to have an individual who they know is homeless in their property. And so it's difficult often to get landlords to participate in this project. So what would be really important for you all to stress today is the importance of landlords signing up for the program through housing and participating. And that helps us ensure that there are far more properties available so people can actually have a real choice in where they live.
Thanks, I don't want to monopolize all the questions.
That's okay.
I had
It's a little late for that.
I had a quick background question. It sounded like at the beginning, and I missed the statistic, that the unsheltered population, the homeless population, may be on the rise by latest censuses. Did I get that incorrect?
It has been on the rise. I don't think that should surprise anyone.
What kind of driving factors are behind that? As well?
Well, so there's chronic homelessness and there's temporary homelessness. You all are probably more familiar with temporary homelessness. College student, graduates, doesn't have a job, hangs out with some friends. We call that couch surfing. There may be someone who might be having some financial difficulty for a while, comes back home, or stays with a friend for 2 or 3 months till they start work or get themselves in a better situation. There are more severe situations in terms of domestic violence where we need to shelter folks temporarily and then they find another accommodation. But there is what we are most concerned about, which is chronic homelessness, where individuals have been homeless for an extended period of time. Ms. Darnrush can give you the definition, but the bottom line is that ultimately these individuals have been homeless for so long that that is the state that they know, and in some ways, in some circumstances, become comfortable with that. There is also a subset that are on the street because they've been put out by family. They are engaging in illegal activities. And being on the street means there are no rules you follow. Whereas in a home, you have to pay rent, you have to do utilities and those kinds of things. So we have people who panhandle, appear to be homeless. They'll typically have signs that say, I'm a vet, because people like to give to vets and those kinds of things, where in effect, they're actually not homeless. So that's the composition in terms of the diversity of homelessness. But the reality is not having affordable housing, not being able to afford an apartment, not having employment, not being educated enough to get a job that gives you a high enough salary, all of the general life issues that impact other things affect homelessness eventually. And so part of what we strive to do is promote education as well for homeless individuals, economic development, employment opportunities, all of the things that regular citizens need to have in order to be able to earn income and stay in a home, provided there is a house that is affordable.
Is there any theory, though, maybe this isn't maybe you're not the right person for this question, but I mean, I thought the economy was recovering, right? I thought we had a great crash in 2008, 2009, we've been building back up, and joblessness is at like a very low level now, and so why are we seeing an increase?
Well, across the state, that there are people, because of when the economy crashed, there were people who were in dire straits that had never been in dire straits, correct? And you all know that the middle class is becoming smaller. So people who are already poor, already disadvantaged, who already have significant issues like mental health and substance abuse, are people who have already been impacted significantly. When the rest of the country and rest of the state is suffering as well, the resources become that much more meager. And so they don't bounce back as easily as those of us who are in temporary situations like homelessness or unemployment. So there will be some folks who will not bounce back and require a lot of hand-holding and support in order to get to the next step. And that next step sometimes takes a very long time.
One more on this, guys.
There was some news recently on higher rents or high rents in the city. Does escalating rent contribute to this at a very basic level?
So absolutely. So, for young people, for example, I just heard a story recently. Young people are quite comfortable, college friends, you'll have 6, 7 folks sharing an apartment, and will be creative about how they arrange it so they can save money and, and maybe have some place that they can live comfortably in. But that's not as easy to do for folks, again, who aren't in the situation we're talking about. These are young people who usually have a college education, usually have a job, maybe want to stay in a high-income area, have a nice place, and they don't mind sharing. The clients we're talking about are not in that kind of situation. And so, again, folks who can afford to even share an apartment are likely to be the ones who will get those apartments, and those who have no money or who have other issues are not likely to be the persons that someone would want to rent their apartment to. So it's a number of complicated issues that make it difficult for individuals who are homeless to be in homes.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Welcome. Go down. Thank you. There's a possibility I might miss this for 2 weeks.
Well, since Madam Mary worked looking at me, and I missed you the last couple of weeks.
Did you really?
I really did. This is fun, but you said recently you support the claims in a lawsuit filed by a bunch of civil rights groups against Larry Hogan as far as canceling the red line. And I remember you saying in this particular room that it's the state's responsibility to plan and operate regional transit for Metro Baltimore. Does it seem that this lawsuit comes politically opportunistic, considering the long history of, quite frankly, bad management planning decisions by the MTA?
I don't. You're suggesting that the ACLU and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund are mounting a political challenge, not a civil rights challenge? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm suggesting that they had ample years of opportunity to claim that there were bad practices that held certain neighborhoods in the city back.
I mean, I guess that's a question that you pose to them. What I would say is, over the past 10 years, at least, we have had a lot of optimism about a significant investment that was coming to the city. And we had that optimism because under 2 different administration, a Republican administration and a Democratic administration previous to this one, there were commitments made that a transformative infrastructure project was coming to the city. So I don't know, while you said that the public transportation needs weren't being met during that time, it was a time where the community and stakeholders were participating in a process that with a goal in mind, which was to get those dollars into Baltimore, get those investments into Baltimore, and correct the problem.
So are you saying, okay, so now they're claiming that the cancellation of Red Line was racially motivated. Do you personally think it was racially motivated?
I think that's up for the court to decide. What I do know is that when we have an obligation, the state has an obligation. You said that I said it. I am acknowledging the state law. The state has an obligation to provide for the public transportation needs for the entire state. And although they eliminated us from their transportation map, Baltimore City is a part of the state of Maryland. They have to fulfill that obligation. And when you take a significant infrastructure project and replace it with shiny new buses and suggest that that's going to be a suitable alternative, I just don't think that that makes sense when you state that you care and you're concerned about the people who are living at or below the poverty line in Baltimore. When you say that you're concerned about the future of young people in Baltimore, then I would think that your level of investment would be reflective of that concern.
Outside of that, even from people who ride the MTA system every day, they complain how horrible it is and that it's not really a connected system. At least what the state is offering, and they're still talking it out. They're still having these workshops and these comment periods. Could it be something that's usable in the meantime until there's another opportunity to build a rapid rail system that connects this stuff?
I think your question, while important, is premature because the state is right now rolling out their proposal to the impacted communities, and I think it's up to them, the people who depend on those services the most, to answer that question.
You know, the one comment I get from other people outside of Baltimore is that Baltimore doesn't really have a transit system. Do you think we have a transit system with what we have now, even if the red line wasn't on the table?
So you started off this long string of questions by talking about the fact that the ACLU and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund could have mounted this charge earlier because of the poor transportation system. So I think you started off answering that question.
Okay, but do you think it's not about what I think? Do you think we have a transit?
Are you suggesting that while everybody else, including people who use the public transportation here, think that the transportation system is poor and doesn't meet our needs, that I would have a different opinion? That's what you're suggesting.
No, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking.
It doesn't meet our needs, and that's why I fought for additional infrastructure investment so we could get a system that works. That doesn't happen. That hasn't happened, and the replacement project, I think, pales in comparison to what the rapid rail could have meant for Baltimore.
Anybody else?
That's why I started off by saying there's a possibility that I could miss this.
You don't want this.
I'll say one thing, and maybe this is a leading question, but I heard a lot of discussion on the radio about whether Larry Hogan himself is personally racist. And to me, that kind of misses the point, right? The point of the lawsuit is more about whether the policies and the outcomes of public funds are used in a way that is beneficial to people of all.
Yeah, and I think I think that type of question, again, like as you said, really misses the point. This is not a personal attack at Governor Hogan, and I'm not trying to politicize this issue. There is a clear need for a public transportation system that works for the city of Baltimore. For years, the state has attempted to and failed to meet their obligation here. We can see that there is a gap between the need and what is provided. Just if you take a look at the Charm City Circulator, I mean, it's widely used, not because it's free, but because it connects people to where they are and where they want to be in a reliable and efficient way. So we know that there are gaps in what is our need in public transportation, and I've yet to see anything from the state that would effectively close those gaps.
While we're talking about the state, I know it's a little early, but the General Assembly starts soon. Do you have any legislative priorities?
I do, and I'll be releasing those, not today.
So you're not going to give us a sneak peek?
No.
Well, can you give us a sneak peek in what your Christmas plans are?
Laundry. And hopefully a lot of spiked eggnog.
I don't feel so bad now.
No, just spending time with family and friends, catching up with people. The good stuff.
All right.
Great.
All right, thank you.